Welcome everyone to this week's final session of a virtual Advocacy Week training. My name is Emily Taylor. I'm the Vice President of Advocacy and Engagement, and I'm so excited to have you all join us for this virtual training webinar session today. Just a quick overview of what we'll be working on, we'll be covering in this session. We'll have some quick welcome and introductions, a little bit about what to expect during your advocacy meeting from a very special guest. We'll go into how to tell your story with Amanda on our SolveME team, and then I'll go last but not least into our details of what we'll be asking for, and then we'll save some time at the end for Q&A. And if we don't get to your questions, don't worry, we can always answer them by email after the fact. So we'll get to as many as we can. With that, I'll go ahead and give a quick introduction of your team. This is the group that's responsible for all of our Advocacy Week agenda items. Next slide, please. The first person is myself. Hi, I'm Emily Taylor. I'm the quarterback of the whole team. I handle all of our legislative strategic development, including the programmatic decisions that make all of this wonderful process possible. I'm also so thrilled to be here and supported by Monique Wicke, our advocacy manager, who has been working here in the background to make sure everything has fallen into place. She's done an amazing job, and we're so excited to make sure you have the best and most positive advocacy experience possible during Advocacy Week. She's been assisted, and we've all been working with Amanda Martin, our engagement manager. You'll be hearing more from her during the storytelling portion of the presentation, but she is hard at work keeping our community connected, being the advocacy or the engagement backbone of everything that we do. So thank you, Amanda. And last but most certainly not least, from the SolveME team, we have Raquel Valencia, our Advocacy Week coordinator, who's your main point of contact for all things advocacy related, here to help you navigate Advocacy Week and all of the different experiences we have today. So just a reminder that we're hybrid this year. So we do have in-person and virtual events. And so for those of you who will be joining us in person, you get to meet the team in person. And for those of us joining us virtually, you'll be having us at your backs all day on Thursday to help you virtually throughout that wonderful event. And most certainly not least, but last but to the introduction party is Stuart Chapman from Thorn Run. This is from our group Thorn Run Partners, our DC team, as I affectionately call them. They help us maintain and build all of our legislative relationships behind the scenes, and they're a critical part of the group that does all of our advocacy work here at SolveME. So with that, we'll dive right into a schedule of events, what you can expect during the Advocacy Week activities this year. So just a quick overview. You may remember the green, yellow, and red scale. Green being events that are low energy or require minimal energy to participate. Yellow requiring a medium amount of energy, might require some note-taking or cognitive effort. And red being high energy events, things that require decision-making, cognitive attention, and processing. So you can see the breakdown. We try to give it as much of a break as possible between the red events and the yellow and green events, but just so you can see the breakdown of getting a rest day in the middle during Social Action Day. All of the events in person kick off on Monday, April 17th. That's our in-person training day taking place at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. Then just a short 8-minute walk or a short drive, because we'll have shuttle service available throughout the day as well. Down the way is the actual Senate office buildings, which is where our Tuesday, April 18th events will be taking place, in the Capitol Visitor Center and the office buildings there, where you'll be meeting with your members of Congress throughout the day. On Wednesday, we have a little bit of a rest day where we take social media action. Thursday is, of course, the virtual House Day, where all of us will be taking our virtual meetings with members of the House of Representatives on that day. And Friday is Empower ME Day. So we'll go through this in just a little bit more detail. And especially if anyone wants to just show by raise of hands real fast, how many people will be joining us in person? No? Okay, so it looks like most folks will be joining us virtually. Great, so I won't spend a little bit. Okay, there's a high hand, excellent. So I'll spend a little bit more time on the virtual events because it looks like we have more virtual folks, but I'll quickly cover the in-person schedule just for our in-person folks as well. So here's our in-person events breakdown for those of us joining us in Washington, D.C. On Monday, we have a full day at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. So that'll be located just a short way from where we'll actually be meeting on Tuesday. But on Monday, we're all at the hotel. Breakfast, lunch, and a light dinner are all provided. When we have, you'll be getting phone calls asking about your dietary sensitivities if you have any. We'll definitely keep those in mind. The events begin at 10 a.m. with a panel, including Stuart Chapman, who will be advising us on the advocacy perspectives, a really cool roundtable fireside chat discussion. Then we'll have a break. We have lots of breaks built into the day. Then we have our advocacy storytelling session at 1 p.m. Amanda will once again be joining with another advocate to talk more about how to break down your advocacy story in a way that's compelling and effective for our advocacy work. Then another break. Then at 3:30, we'll be having the deep dive into what we're asking for, our talking points, and also a logistics of the day for using the app and a map and all those different important aspects. And then, of course, if you still have any energy after all of that, you're welcome to join us for a networking reception, which is optional, but an opportunity to get and meet with your groups and plan your strategy for the next day if you are joining us staying overnight at the hotel. And then Tuesday, the next day, begins with the congressional meetings, and those will be taking place throughout the day. We have 2 rest areas for everyone, which is very exciting. So we have a rest area at the hotel, and around the clock, I said 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. shuttle service that will be going every half an hour. That can bring you back to the Senate buildings. And then we have rest areas at the Senate buildings as well in the visitor center that folks can also use to be close to their meetings on both ends. So you'll have lots of areas and spaces to rest on your way to your meetings and back again. Then, of course, we'll end with a networking reception. So thank you so much for our in-person folks. We'll switch it over to our virtual events for all of our virtual participants. Welcome and thank you, virtual participants. On Wednesday, April 19th, we'll have Social Media Action Day. This is also tying in with the regular Wednesday Emmy Awareness Hour, which is at 3 p.m. Eastern. So we ask that you try to target your tweets around that time, but it's flexible throughout the day. We're just hoping to get a lot of Twitter and social media activity, get those hashtags flowing, really emphasize the actions that'll be happening throughout the week. Then on Thursday is our House Advocacy Day. This is for everyone who's participating virtually. You'll get to dial in on Zoom using the Advocacy Associates platform to take your meetings with members of Congress and their staff. So we're really excited for that all day. And it'll be just noting that those will be based on your local time. So if it says 9 a.m. and we've asked that no meetings go before 10 a.m., but there might be a couple that we have to do before 9 a.m., but it's your local time versus up to 5 p.m. Again, your local time, East Coast time at the end of the day. So just letting you know exactly where that stands for even those our folks in Hawaii that are have a real big time difference. It's all based on your local time. And last but not least, Empower ME Day, which is our classic Empower ME annual roundtable. This year, we'll be looking at energy limiting disabilities, how to navigate different aspects of life with them for some really cool experts. There'll be the central panel that takes place at 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Again, this will be recorded and available for everyone after the fact. And then throughout the day, there'll be breakout sessions with our experts so that you can have one-on-one time with the experts to ask them about that individual area of accommodations and disability for people with energy limiting disabilities. So really great agenda for the virtual events. Hope you all can join as much as you can. And again, if not, they're recorded, so you can watch them on your own time. With that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Stuart Chapman to go through what to expect when you're meeting with your members of Congress.
Thank you, Emily. We have thoroughly, at Thorn Run Partners, we've thoroughly enjoyed working with SolveME for about 5 years now, and looking forward to talking with you tonight and seeing you next week, whether it's in person or virtually. So just want to share, Emily has asked me to share a few details about what the world looks like and why we go through this effort to meet with members of Congress, again, whether in person or virtually. Monique, do you want to, how to use the portal? Okay, go ahead. What to expect in congressional meetings. Every meeting is important. So, you know, when you think about members of Congress on the House side, they represent 730,000 people in their congressional, in those 435 districts, give or take 10 or 20,000. On the Senate side, I mean, you could have a state like Rhode Island, but you could also have a state like California, where Emily lives and many of you live. And, you're dealing with 45, 50 million people. Why do we come to the Hill? We're trying to sort of break through all of that noise and make sure that the concerns of Solve ME CFS and long COVID are heard during those conversations. So when you're meeting in Congress, we are coming back on a session next week. We're off for 2 weeks, have been off for 2 weeks. This is the second of a Passover Easter recess. Members will be back next week for what is going to be a very intense period from the middle of April to basically Memorial Day. So when we're going into these offices, there may be an opportunity to speak with a member of Congress, your senator or representative, but it also is more likely that you will see staffers who are in those offices. Staffers, again, to use the House office example, a member of Congress can have up to 18 staffers. Usually 9 to 10 of those full-time are in the DC office. The member of Congress representing those 730,000 people depends on those staffers. On the legislative side, you'll have 3 or 4 staffers. You're going to be talking to one of those staffers next week if you're not talking to the member. And those members, there are going to be a lot of people who are 25 and you're going to say, what are they doing here? They're smart and they're making big decisions for their members of Congress. So think about that as the possibility of engaging with them. When we're speaking with a member and when we're having a meeting, we want to give them the key points. As you're going to be told going into these meetings, assume that you're going to be going in for a 15-minute meeting. It'll likely run a little later, but you want to go in, you want to introduce yourself, you want to share who you are and your story, and you want to give them the key points. In many cases, in most cases, in fact, if you're on the congressional side and you're having a meeting with outside advocates, there's an expectation that you're going to be asking for something. And thanks to the GR team that you have at Solve ME CFS with Monique and Emily, we have asked that we're going to make of them, and we'll be going over those. But the important thing is to go in, be concise, go ahead and start the meeting, speak clearly, talk about your situation, and be prepared for the possibility. One thing that's not mentioned here, the meeting could start late, that is mentioned here, could end early, or we could be moved. In some cases, we may not be in the office. In some cases, we may be meeting in the hallways. It happens all the time. Happens to us, it happens to Emily, it happens to tons of people. So just be flexible in terms of timing and in terms of spatial location. Next slide, Monique, if you will. Most of the days are run by members and their staff in 15-minute increments, like I said. The meeting may run as late as 30 minutes, but we always plan and we always tell clients to go in with the assumption that it's going to be 15 minutes. What do you want to do? You want to be brief, you want to be brilliant, and you want to be done. So we want to go straight to those talking points. Co-sponsor that Care for Long COVID Act. Up to 32 million Americans are estimated to have infection-associated chronic illnesses like long COVID and ME/CFS. Please ask your member of Congress, or please, if you're talking to Congressman Smith, please, Congressman Smith, support these struggling Americans and their families by co-sponsoring this bill. Don't get bogged down with the details. We want to be able to leave that meeting having them think about not only your stories, but exactly what the policy ask is that we're making of them. Next slide, Monique. Be nice. Staffers are overworked. They definitely remember the bad meetings. And so, what we want to do is we want to be extraordinarily gracious, extraordinarily nice. And I love doing meetings with you all. You are exactly that. You bring your stories. I mean, you're the ones who have, in many cases, even greater challenge than they do. But we need to be mindful of the fact that they are overworked. They get so many calls, so many letters, so many requests. What they do remember are those angry or rude constituents. And this second point here, is so, so important. We're going in for a meeting and we may or may not get them to sponsor a piece of legislation or write a letter for us or support one of our appropriations efforts. But in my mind, this is always a long-term relationship. Emily is extraordinarily good at this. You know, we ask a lot of times for them to support bills that we support. They can't for whatever reason or don't. But that we can't be dejected by that. We're always thinking about we want to maintain that relationship because we're going to need them for the next letter, an appropriations project, or to speak at one of our conferences. So always think about those long-term relationships that we're building. And the best thing possible, and this comes out so much in your advocacy days, members of Congress care about a lot of things, but they especially care when there are constituents who are sharing these issues with them, whether it's from their district or from their state. Nothing moves in office like having someone who's local. Next slide, please, Monique. Stick to your schedule. Don't miss a scheduled meeting. You know, you never forget those meetings that don't show up. If for whatever reason you're having issues, call the Advocacy Associates phone number that's listed in the talking points section for any problems. Offices and staffers and members are pretty accommodating if they're just given notice, and they'll try to be flexible. They may, just so you know, just to remind you, they too may have challenges on their end. But, you know, taken all together, as long as there's communication, staff and offices feel like they appreciate that enormously. If you run into a situation where there has to be a rescheduling of a meeting, don't do that on your own. We have advocacy associates to take care of that. And then, as I said earlier, you know, we are playing the long game here. I mean, we need immediate results, but we have a long game in front of us. If there are bad scheduling experiences, it's going to be that much harder to develop relationships with those offices. Monique? Next slide. Yes, thank you. Stay on message. You know, right at the beginning, you may have, you know, you want to introduce yourself and begin to talk about your story. And I know Amanda's going to talk more about that in a second. To the extent that you can make sure it's full, but make sure it's also brief. But it is those personal experiences, as Emily and Monique and others we see all the time from you, is that you can just see the staffer when they hear the experiences that you all have had, that means more to them from a day of stats and votes and vote recommendations and calls coming in. You can just see them willing to sit and listen. And so it is those sort of moments where you can tie the personal into the sort of larger policy efforts that can make a difference for a letter, a bill, money for more research for long COVID. So introduce yourself, share your personal experiences, emphasize what this means for healthcare and your healthcare and the constituents, as in you or those around you. Forces the member to listen right from the beginning. Speak plainly. One of the most important things you can do, again, is those real world consequences. I mean, you know, these folks hear abstract items all day long about particular missiles that we should fund or particular programs in the Department of Agriculture we could fund. When they hear those personal stories, when they hear those tied to the policy suggestions that we're advocating for, that will definitely make a difference. Monique, next slide. Yes, and don't assume. Go in. This is exactly, your story is the most compelling reason for Congress to support this bill. We need to hear your story. Don't assume that staff knows too much or too little about the topic. When we do meetings with Emily, she often says, I don't want to make assumptions. Are there things that I can tell you about solving MECFS? Or are there things I can tell you about MECFS or long COVID or whatever? So I think you'll know right away and you'll get a feel for some of the offices are well steeped in these issues, some are not. And, you know, you will have, whether it's me or someone else, there will be a leader that will be able to sort of steer us in the right direction on that. And as far as how much we need to go into things, but be clear, be brilliant, get to the point, and assume that we're going to be there for 15 or 20 minutes. It's going to be a long day, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person. We just need to make sure that we're getting to as many folks as possible, because there is nothing that moves an office like a personal interaction that we are going to be doing on Tuesday and Thursday. And I think that's it. And I think I need to move it back to Emily.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stuart. That was so helpful, and really appreciate that insider look at what's going on in a staffer's office and in these congressional offices. We'll be getting to questions at the end, but right now we're going to turn over to Amanda to go through how to best shape your story. Your story is the most important tool you have. So how do you sharpen and hone that tool to use it for Advocacy Day?
Thank you, Emily. So I'm very excited to dive in about storytelling do's and don'ts. You'll notice that a lot of what I talk about is actually what Stuart already touched on, but these are the most important things that we want to make sure to go over, even if we have to say it one more time. So diving into the do's to begin with, being honest and authentic. Exactly what Stuart said. People are wanting to hear your honest story. There's no need to exaggerate or no need to really explain anything besides what is your story. You're there for a reason, and the staffer or the congressperson that is there listening to you is very eager to hear why you're there. They care about you, so you don't have to be intimidated. That being said, it's okay to share emotion, and your story is very powerful. So if at the time, it's not uncommon that you might get tearful, that you might just get overcome with emotion, that's okay. It's okay to do that, and they're there to let you share your authentic journey. It's important to connect your experience to the ask. So we're going to go over a storytelling worksheet later in this presentation to help you develop kind of a template of how you can share your story and tie it back into what our legislative asks are. But I do want to stress that now, that it's really important that when you tell your story, you're continuing to connect it back to, this is my experience, and that is why it's really important that you support these bills. It's okay to repeat the asks. To you, it might sound like you have heard these bills being talked about left and right with the trainings and then also during your different meetings. But to that staffer or to that legislator, that might be the first time that they're hearing it. So if they hear it once, twice, 3 times, many times, that's okay. Just continue to repeat. This is why we're here. We're asking you for this. Also, I just want to share that if you have a story that is related also to the legislation that we're asking for, that's a good one to potentially include. And again, we'll go back to that when we go over the storytelling worksheet. Moving over to the don'ts. It's important not to be negative. Again, Stuart touched on this. They'll remember bad experiences. So even though you might have difficult things in your story that you're expressing, I mean, of course, you're here because you had to overcome a challenge, or maybe you're still in the throes of that challenge. It's okay to share your hardships, but that's different than just being negative. Think about focusing on the facts of what happened, the facts of your experience. I guarantee you that that alone is enough to share your story. Don't get distracted or connect to unrelated topics. So again, it's really important that we zero in on what our asks are and that we keep our story concise and to the point. So we don't want to jump into other topics like other legislation, or jump into, the Supreme Court is doing XYZ, or by the way, I noticed that this legislator is doing this other policy over here. We don't want to get distracted by other things in our story or other legislative things going on. We really want to focus on what we're there and asking that day, because the more clear of a story that we can express to them, that's what they're going to remember. And that's more likely that they will support the bills that we're asking them to support. Don't make accusations or assumptions. So even if maybe you disagree or you have different political views than the person that you're meeting that day or their staffers. We don't want to make assumptions based on their previous legislative track record or just based on their beliefs on anything. We want to come in with a completely clean slate, and we don't want to assume that they will lean one way or another. Just present your story, present the facts, ask them to support our bills. We also don't want to counter or disagree with any other advocates. So if you hear somebody say something on our team, on your team, another advocate that's there, and you don't agree with that, it's important that we don't show that we don't have that disagreement during the meeting. And if it's something that is really important to you or you think needs to be clarified, it's something that we can discuss after the meeting. And if needed, we can address that later, but just during the meetings, we don't want to counter and disagree. Lastly on this slide, but very, very important, it is 100% okay if you don't want to share. If you are feeling tired that day and you're unable to share your story, if you're just not up to it for whatever reason, your presence in that room, virtually or in person, means everything. So again, if you don't want to share that day, we have that perfect line right there. Just, I'm not well enough to share today, but I stand with my fellow advocates. Please co-sponsor this important bill. A few best practices during your meeting. We already discussed, be positive. Again, sharing the facts of a negative experience doesn't make what you're saying negative. You're just sharing the facts. But being like really beating down on the difficult parts and how hard it was for you and all of those details leaves a bad taste, unfortunately, in the mouths of the staff members or the legislators. And we want them to leave with a really positive experience, but they'll still remember the hardships of your story. Practice active listening, both with the other advocates that are with you and with a staff or a legislator that you're meeting with. Take notes. You will have the opportunity to take copious notes during your meetings. Anything and everything, feel free to take those notes down and ask questions. This kind of goes back actually to the assumptions page from the previous one, but if the staffers might use, or the legislators, anybody in the meeting, they might use acronyms that you don't understand. I had the privilege to go with Emily and our Thorn Run team to different meetings on Capitol Hill a month ago or 2 months ago, and they are well versed in all things on Capitol Hill. So they were saying all these acronyms back and forth. I was taking notes trying to remember, but didn't catch everything because that's just their everyday vocabulary. But for you, if somebody says something in a meeting that you don't understand, it is totally okay to just say, oh, excuse me, I don't know what this acronym means. Can you explain? That's okay. Likewise, if you say an acronym or you're well versed in your experience in MECFS in long COVID, well, they might not be. So they might not know certain words or acronyms or things that you're used to. So think about breaking things down to a very basic level and feel free to ask questions if there's something you don't understand. If for whatever reason somebody says something that you find offensive, specifically any staffers or legislators you're meeting with, or something that you want to correct, for example, if they say chronic fatigue syndrome and you prefer myalgic encephalomyelitis, always correct with kindness. You can just say, actually, we prefer the term myalgic encephalomyelitis. That's okay. Make eye contact. When you're in the meetings, it's very important to make eye contact. And likewise, if you are doing the virtual meetings, it's very difficult to connect with someone if they are looking somewhere else. Because even though they might be looking at the camera or on the screen to them, if they're looking down here, it feels really different than if they're looking at the camera. So be mindful of where it looks like you're looking if you're doing the virtual meetings. A lot of times our cameras have those little red lights or green lights by them in laptops or in webcams. Think about looking directly at that light while you're talking so that you can make more of that connection with whoever you're meeting with. Remember, one more, Jeopardy rules. Oh, this one's one of my favorites. So think about stating your ask in the form of a question. So instead of saying, will instead of, sorry, I'm jumping off. Instead of thinking of, we really need you to support these bills, you can ask in a question like, what can we do to guarantee you will support these bills? Or another way, will the senator stand by these bills? So by forming your ask into a question, it can be a more powerful way to get your point across. And you can also see if they have any reservations in supporting these bills. And it gives you an opportunity to answer, if they have any reservations, you can counter and let them know why they should still support them. And remember, if you don't have all the answers, that's 100% okay. You are there to be the expert in your story, and you are the expert in your story. You don't have to be the expert in these bills. They're long and they're wordy and they're complicated, and that's okay if they ask a question and you don't know. If you don't know the answer, you can take down their question and just let them know, I don't have the answer right now, but I will have someone on my team get back to you after this meeting. And make sure that you write down their question and you write down their contact information. And that way we can get back to them after that meeting. And if you lose your place at any point, you can always refer back to your handout, which will have a great outline for the meeting. This is the personal stories worksheet that I mentioned earlier. No worries, we're not going to dive into all of the different pieces, but this will actually be in your participant packet that you should have received. And we can also drop the link right now into the chat. This worksheet is really helpful for you to go through by yourself. It's not something that we'll go through all together, but there are these different workshops, as you can see, workshop 1, 2, and 3, and you can work through it independently to help get your story that in a way that's ready to present for those 5 minutes in front of the legislators. Workshop number 1, you're really just brainstorming and just writing everything down. You set a timer for 20 minutes and you just write down your whole story. Then you select some key points that, and there are some examples there that might resonate with your story, that you might see come up, some of the themes that might come up in your story. In workshop number 2, you're going to see how that might intersect with other social and political identities that you might have, or again, there are some examples there, and you will connect that back with your original stories. Workshop number 3, and we're taking things that we got from workshop number 1, workshop number 2, tying it into workshop number 3. Now we're tying it all back to our legislative asks. And we might see where they might overlap and cross over with what we're asking for that day. And then finally, the last part is to just putting it together in a very concise and clear way. And I would really highly recommend practicing your story. Maybe you can record yourself on your phone and hear what it sounds like when it comes back to you, writing it down, maybe presenting to a friend or family member. That could be a really helpful way to get your story into a concise, clear way that's ready for the big advocacy days next week. That's all I have in terms of your storytelling. So if you have any questions, please keep them till the end or drop them into the chat. And again, thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So really quickly, we're gonna, unfortunately, I'm just noticing we're a little tight on time, so we're gonna go quickly through the sample meeting outline. I'll just remind you that this is all available. We can download the slides after the presentation if you want to take a look at these in more depth. But really quickly, there's 3 parts to a meeting. There's the introduction, the storytelling, and then the conclusion and the wrap up. So if we could do next slide, please. In the introduction, oh, sorry, I almost forgot. I'm diving right in. I forgot about one of the most important parts, group leads. So for every group, we'll have a group lead. I saw the questions coming up earlier. We do have a lot of new folks participating for the first time. And so we always make sure to put an experienced group lead, someone who's done this before in every group that can help navigate the meeting for the new folks. So everyone can feel comfortable and have an opportunity to share. So if you are a group lead, you'll notice that is indicated by a star next to your name in the Advocacy Associates online tool, or on the app that you have, depending on if you're in person or remote. You'll use the online tool if you're remote and the app if you're in person. But either way, you'll notice a star next to the name of the group leader. The group leader is just really there to open the meeting, to ensure everyone feels welcome, and most importantly, to ensure keep track of time and ensure that everyone has a chance to share. So especially for folks who maybe get excited or nervous during their first opportunity to chat and they kind of go over and they ramble a little bit, that's okay. But we just want to make sure everyone in the group has a chance to share. As Stuart described, we only have between 15 and 25 minutes to talk with these folks. So it's a very short amount of time. And we have between 3 and 5 people, and some groups are a little bit bigger, but mostly between 3 and 5 people in each group. So everybody should have about 3 to 5 minutes to share their story. But if someone's going a little long, that eats into someone else's time. So it's important that the group lead just gently correct and just say, you know, we have 1 minute left. We want to make sure everyone has a chance to share. And one of the other important elements for a group lead is to ask for or identify contact information at the beginning of the meeting, just to make sure, especially we noted that sometimes meetings can change, switch schedules. Sometimes you'll even get a switch staffer and you'll get a different staffer than the one we had anticipated talking to. So just confirm who you're talking with and make sure we have their contact information so that we can follow up. Important to note, if you are noticing you're a group lead, if you see that star next to your name, but you do not want to be a group lead, please let us know immediately. You can email Raquel at rvalencia@solvecfs.org to let us know so we can change that around and make sure we have an experienced advocate in that meeting willing to be the group lead for everyone. One next slide about group leads. Just a couple best practices if you are a group lead. Everyone should plan to call into your first call, actually to every call a few minutes early, but we ask that the group lead call in about 10 minutes early to welcome everyone as they come in. When you start the meeting, you make introductions just to especially identify the constituent in the room and make the one sentence ask, which is please support the Care for Long COVID Act at the beginning of the meeting. So it's very clear what we're asking for. And also it's very clear who the constituent in the room is. The members are very dedicated to their constituency, to the folks that they represent, and they want to make sure that they're giving the time and attention to the constituent. So we want to make it easy and identify that person very clearly for them. Again, make sure everyone has the opportunity to speak. Just be helpful in minding everyone's time. And then last, the wrap up and thanks, just to thank everyone for their time and sign off of the meeting. So that's the role of group leads. Again, if you have any questions or any thoughts about being or concerns about being a group lead, please let us know. You can email us and we'll be happy to assist. So now that we have our group leads established, how does a meeting run? What should a meeting look like? So as I said, there's 3 parts to every meeting. There's the introduction, the storytelling, and then the wrap up. The introduction is very quick, kind of like round robin hot potato style. That's one way to do it. So this is the way that we kind of are showing as an example here. The group lead will begin the meeting when the congressional office joins the call. They'll invite the congressional representative to introduce them first. And after they're finished, they'll invite all the other advocates to represent themselves. So very quickly, here's a sample opening that a group lead could potentially use. And then when everyone introduces themselves in this version, it's the very short version, just name, city and state, and your connection to the disease. So for example, mine would be, my name is Emily Taylor. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and my mother is a patient with ME/CFS since 2008. That's my introduction. So that's the really short version. Then after everyone's introduced and comfortable, we just remind them why we're there. Then we go into the storytelling section. That's section 2. Next slide, please. So during the storytelling, this is where it's about 3 to 5 minutes per person, a little bit more time for people to really share their thoughts about their experiences in a little bit more depth. More than just name, location, and connection. This is a little bit more, again, you use your storytelling worksheet to help you guide your story and how to shape what you want to talk about. But remember, the most important thing to include in your story is the ask. Always make sure to say, please co-sponsor the Care for Long COVID Act. And then lastly, we have the wrap up. This is just where you ask any questions that you might have. You repeat the asks and always ensure that you're asking them, what's the next step? How can we follow up? What's the best way to reach out in case of an update? So that we can get that information and plug it into our follow-up. So again, in the House, we're saying, please co-sponsor the Care for Long COVID Act. That's HR 1616. And then the Senate, please co-sponsor the Care for Long COVID Act. That's S801. So just a recap of what a meeting looks like. With that, I'm going to go into the much anticipated, what are we actually asking for this year? Why the Care for Long COVID Act and what makes the Care for Long COVID Act so special? So as I mentioned, we're saying the asks are very clear. please co-sponsor the Care for Long COVID Act. I'm sorry, that figure on the right-hand side, it's outdated. It's from last year's Advocacy Week, but please, you can note the new figures that up to 32 million Americans are estimated to have infection-associated chronic illnesses like ME/CFS and long COVID. So please support these struggling Americans by co-sponsoring the Care for Long COVID Act. So that's our overall messaging. Now a little bit more about what's in the Care for Long COVID Act. Next slide, please. There we go. The Care for Long COVID Act is sponsored in the Senate by Senators Kaine, Markey, and Duckworth, which are reintroducing it this year, and in the House by Representatives Don Beyer and Jack Bergman. I'll just make a note, this came up earlier today, and so many thanks to the advocate who noted this. They noted that they were in an office meeting with one of the original co-sponsors of the bill, and they say, what do I tell this person? They're already sponsoring the bill. What do I ask instead of asking them to co-sponsor? And I said, you need to thank them. You need to thank them profusely. They need to feel so much love coming from their constituency that they did this great thing, and they need to know that they've earned votes for it, that they've done the right thing. So definitely, if you do find that you're in either the office of Kaine, Markey, Duckworth, Representative Don Beyer, or Jack Bergman, if you happen to be in the offices, show them so much love. Show them all the thank yous, show them exactly why this bill is going to make your life better, and thank them for it. Okay, so that's a quick aside. So what is the purpose of this bill? The purpose of the bill is to help people living with long-term COVID-19 conditions and associated conditions by improving research and providing resources for people with long COVID and associated conditions. And I'll get to that in just a moment. Again, this year, ME/CFS is specifically mentioned in the bill language as a comorbidity of long COVID. So that's why I keep emphasizing the language and associated conditions, because this is going to really help us all. Next slide, please. So here's a quick little capture of the bill itself. This is from the Senate version. And I just wanted to highlight, so on the left, you see the header of the bill. This is Senate Bill 801. And on the right, you see a selection from the inside of the bill. And the bill has 3 parts to it, but all 3 parts have this identifying language that says the awareness, and this is about the education section. So it says it's going to educate members of the public and medical communities about the awareness, incident, and short and long-term health effects associated with long-term COVID-19 infection, including long COVID-associated disability, and illnesses often related or comorbid with long COVID, which may include ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS, and other forms of dysautonomia, and the list goes on. So you can see that these conditions are specifically called out in the bill, so that when I say and associated conditions, excuse me, so when I emphasize the language and associated conditions, this is what is itemized in the bill by saying and associated conditions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking a little bit more about, again, what will this bill do? This bill has 3 parts. The first part is about data and research and centralizing and synthesizing data for a long COVID related and related conditions registry. It also improves the understanding of treatment efficacy by expanding and disparities by expanding research to provide recommendations to improve the healthcare system's response to long COVID. That's the first part, all about research. The second part is about education. It educates both patients and medical providers through the CDC to, again, treat common information about the symptoms, treatment, and other related conditions, again, with ME/CFS itemized in that area. Lastly, it creates interagency collaboration and coordination so that a lot of the agencies that are currently working on long COVID and ME/CFS can start synergizing and working together rather than not talking to one another. And lastly, and this is new this year, which we're really excited, this section of the bill, there's $50 million for competitive grants for community-based organizations, social service providers, and legal assistance providers to help individuals with long COVID and related conditions access needed services. And that competitive funding is given on a grant award system so that local organizations that are doing good work in the community and helping patients can get additional resources to continue doing so. So that's a little bit and a deep dive about the bill itself. Now I believe we have 1 more slide for you, or maybe 2 more slides for you. Yes. So how does this fit into our overall narrative? What is the story of this bill? Why is this bill? How do we talk about this bill in its narrative about where it came from in public policy? So this is our narrative, how we describe the story of this bill. First, infection-associated chronic illnesses are not new. Millions suffered from long haul diseases like ME/CFS, POTS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and more before the pandemic. However, the pandemic has made millions more sick in a very short period of time, increasing the urgency to act. That's why we need the long COVID bill now, because there are so many more people that are sick all of a sudden that weren't sick before with these infection-associated chronic illnesses. One more slide. Again, long COVID is not new. It's just the latest in a long history of illnesses that are triggered by infection. Infection-associated chronic illnesses are an urgent public health crisis that needs an immediate response. ME/CFS is specifically mentioned as a comorbidity of long COVID in the bills we're fighting for, which is why we urgently need them to pass this year. So with that, I know I saw the chat was already popping up with questions. I believe that's our last slide. Oh, no, we can skip this part. We'll share that another time. I believe we'll just, one more last, thank you, Monique, sorry, wanted to make sure we had time for questions. Lastly, it's really important to mention long COVID and infection-associated chronic illnesses impact on Black, Indigenous, people of color, or BIPOC communities. It's especially important to note that long COVID or COVID particularly was prevalent and particularly particularly affected communities of color especially hard. Sorry, that sentence got away from me. So what I'm trying to emphasize is that Black, Indigenous, people of color are especially impacted by these illnesses. We know this both anecdotally by talking to these communities, and we also know this by the numbers that we've seen in the prevalence figures, that some of these communities have higher prevalence rates than others. So it's really important to emphasize that BIPOC communities really bore the brunt of long COVID the worst and continue to do so, and that we have a moral responsibility to address this the disproportionate impact of these communities when compared to the white counterparts. So just an important area to note. And then I know we're running a little behind time, so I think we just get enough time to do 5 or 10 questions, and we'll move on from there. So thank you all so much for your attention. It was really great to get to talk through a little bit more about this bill and about the work that we've been doing. And with that, I will open it up for anyone that would like to unmute and ask a question. I will also start looking at the questions in the chat, which I'm catching up on. Thank you for your patience. But if anyone would like to ask a question, now's the time. Gillian, I see your hand is raised.
Hi, sorry, it's Jillian.
Oh, Jillian, I'm sorry, Jillian.
That's okay. Logistical question. I went on my Advocacy Associates page, and it looks like they have my group of people meeting with 2 different House rep legislatures at the same time.
Oh goodness, did you assign in 2 meetings at the same time?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I just was wondering if like that kind of stuff is already being sorted out, or if there's a point person that I should keep in mind in case that kind of thing gets, I'm sorry, I'm messing up, but closer.
No, you're not messing up at all. That was really helpful, Jillian. Jillian, thank you. Absolutely. So sometimes meetings do take place at the same time. If you do happen to have 2 at the same time, it's a kind of dealer's choice. It's your choice which one you'd like to go to. But please flag that for us. If you could email rvalencia@solvecfs.org. That's Raquel Valencia. So rvalencia@solvecfs.org. Let her know that you have that flag, and we will work with the scheduling team to get either the meeting moved, or if we can't get the meeting moved, we'll divide the groups so that not everybody's going at the same time.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for flagging that. Bruce, I see your hand is raised.
Forgive me for being a little bit of a troublemaker here. I've been doing advocacy for most of my life in one form or another. And I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about how the bill was shaped, because it really strikes me as a collection of baby steps. I was looking for and hoping for way more than this. And I say this living on Hawaii Island where there are no resources at all.
Understood. Well, thank you so much for your comments, Bruce, and thank you for your advocacy. I can tell you that this bill has been a real beautiful multi-tiered effort from really, and you might notice that from a lot of different aspects of the community, from people in the dysautonomia community, from people in the Ehlers-Danlos community, people in the fibromyalgia community, people in the long COVID community leading the way. And I think it's one of the things that long COVID has sort of elevated in our work, is that we're working more collaboratively across multiple streams. So you're right, this bill does seem like a collection of first steps and baby steps, but that's exactly why I believe it is the bill that has the only bill right now that has bipartisan support, both Republicans and Democrats. And I think because it's a reflection of, yes, we need to do the baby steps first and get to the bigger steps next. So I agree with you that of course, if we could had unlimited resources and we're working, without all of these different factors in play, we might have looked at a really giant piece of legislation that really moved mountains. But this is a real important creative first step, because it was all of these communities coming together, working in tandem to create a unified approach to long COVID from all these different perspectives. Thank you for your question, Bruce. Any other questions that Poca would like to ask? Oh, Allison, I see your hand went up.
Yes, hi, I have a couple questions. I can run through them all and then go back on mute. So the first is, this is my first time doing this. Have people had experiences with staffers? Do they generally know what MECFS is, or should we be prepared to give a basic explanation? That's one question. The second question was in the in the portal, there's links to a couple of documents, including the networking reception invite. I myself will be only doing virtual, but should we be telling the staffer or rep to go to that reception? Is that why that document is there? And then my third question was, I didn't follow the news, but I heard that there was an announcement from the Biden office about funding for long COVID. Is there anything that we should know about that announcement from the White House that we should incorporate into our Ask for Talking Points or not? Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you so much. So first, I'm sorry, I was just taking notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. First, regarding staff knowledge, we have done a lot of groundwork introducing a lot of offices to MECFS and long COVID. So based on our previous work, some offices actually have a really strong working knowledge of our issue, but not all of them. So it will be kind of hit or miss depending on which office you get, whether or not they have that working knowledge. And that's a great way to start the conversation with them. I used to always begin my advocacy conversations with, have you heard of MECFS and do you know someone that has it? And then that would be a great jumping off point, because then if they said, oh yeah, my sister, I'm like, great, I can go straight into some other details. But if they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, like, great, let me talk at the beginning and let's start with, my story, my experience, what this can do to a family, and then go from there. So so it really can vary. So I think it's great to just ask that introductory question, are you familiar with this disease? And then base the rest of your advocacy conversation from there. So being a little flexible. Regarding the reception, great question again. So we've sent that reception invitation to all of the staff that have confirmed meetings, so that we're gonna wine them and dine them a little bit, invite them to come meet with advocates on their own time, maybe have a little bit more of a relaxed conversation rather than a work conversation with our teams. So that will be taking place. Again, we invited them to attend, but that'll be taking place on Tuesday. So there's no reason to bring it up on your Thursday virtual conversations, because it will have already taken place by then. But we have sent that in advance to all the offices to invite them to join us, to try to get more FaceTime with them and try to have more opportunities to talk to them about our important issues. So great question about the reception. And then lastly, the funding for long COVID from the administration. It's so funny you mentioned this, because I was actually just talking with the team the other day about whether or not we should include the Biden announcement in the packets. But we decided at the end it was like 6 pages long, and the packets were already 22 pages long, and we just thought it was too much information to throw at you. But I'd be happy to include that link in the chat. And if we would like to read it, for those of you who are really interested in what the administration is offering, then definitely take an advantage. But what we're doing is a legislative approval. So as you know, Congress holds the purse strings, and the president holds the not the gavel, but the sort of authority over the administrations, over the actual implementation. So he's the hands and Congress is the purse. So we're going to Congress with this one first for the purse, to get it open through authorization. So that's the bill language. And then the president will sign it when it becomes law, and then it'll go through. So it's actually a separate funding stream. We're asking for additional monies outside of what the president has already allocated for his work. So thank you. Great questions all around. I saw a couple more. I did not see if Crystal or Kim went first. So whichever of you was hands up first, please jump in.
I have no idea, but I can be quick. So my question in the chat was Senator King from Maine also had made an announcement that he was sponsoring a long COVID bill. I just went and checked his page and it is the Care for Long COVID Act, but he's not listed on there. So that was my question in the chat, was whether like we should know what the difference between the bills are, but since it's the same, whatever.
Yeah, the bills are the same. Thank you for letting me know about Senator King. I did not see their name get added to the bill, so I did not hear that they had co-sponsored it, but I will follow up with their offices. And that's a great, so if you are meeting with their office, you can actually, I would recommend bringing that up, is saying, I heard from your website that you supported the bill, but I went to congress.gov and your name isn't there. What's going on, man?
Yeah, I can't come down in person. We're a very high risk family. But that was
No
my
worries.
other question, which also is in the chat from someone else, is I am also a school board member. I ran specifically to try to add mitigations to my school to try to protect the students. I am seeing a lot of long COVID in teachers and in students, and none of it's being recognized. And so like, how do I advocate for this entire student population that I am obligated to represent as their elected representative?
Well, actually, I'm going to ask Monique to go back to the slide I skipped over. So now I'm kicking myself for looking over the slide, but to one more back. There we go. So this is actually the Solve ME policy narrative. These are what we are saying as an organization about what policy solutions are urgently needed now. So this, I strongly encourage you to use this narrative and feel free to borrow this for representing your students that are struggling with long COVID. And really, it's a three-part solution. There's short-term, near-term, and long-term solutions, but all of them need to be started now. The short-term solution is preventing immediate harm through medical education. Medical education is our immediate short-term band-aid on the wounds. That if we teach our medical providers now about the potential harm through exercise and about ME/CFS and about related conditions and about what post-acute and chronic illnesses look like, we can sort of prevent the harm that's being done by poorly educated medical professionals now. In the near term, we still need to expand our capacity to care for these folks. We do not have enough clinical providers and by any stretch of the imagination. So number two, in the near term, once we prevent the harm of doctors doing harm now, then we need to expand clinical care capacity to include many, many thousands more beds and many, many thousands more experts that can provide this care well for the expanding patient population. Lastly, and this is of course also long-term, but needs to be started now urgently, is research, research, research. We need to find cures, we need to find treatments, and we have the science is so close. It's like you could taste it, but we need to find the money and we need to find the political will to get these research programs off the ground quickly. And so again, you'll see all three of these reflected in the bill, from medical education for the immediate near term, for research for the long term, and clinical care capacity or community capacity for the near term. So we're looking at this from all angles, and I think that's a great framing to help thinking about what solutions you can offer to your communities in the short term, near term, and long term. Thank you for that question. That was a great question. And Kim, I think we can go a little bit over. We'll take like a couple more questions, but Kim, if you could be fast, we'll squeeze in as many as we can.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this excellent training. This is my first time around and really excited about it. I'm going to just kind of recap a couple of questions I saw in the chat that, and that is, in some cases, we have several people assigned to one group. And so I'm wondering if we should ask our team leads to schedule a meeting ahead of time to coordinate and who should be telling stories. I'm just a little worried. Again, this is my first time around, so maybe I'm overly worried about it.
No, it's totally understandable. It's a normal thing to be concerned about. That's why we ask everyone to dial in about 10 minutes early, and not everyone does. There are some people that don't feel comfortable kind of coordinating with the rest of the group, and they prefer to just come, share their story, and do their own thing, which is fine. We make a space for them as well. But if you'd like to dial in about 10 minutes early, for those in person, just stop by you plan to be at the room about 10 minutes early, and they usually have a nice little waiting area. For those virtually, it'll be like a green room in the Zoom room. So you'll have that there. And then you'll have that 10 minutes kind of discuss who can go first, second, or third, who would like to highlight which aspects of their story. And for me, I say, I'll really be talking about medical education because my mom saw 12 different doctors and none of them had heard what this was. So I kind of share that. So then somebody else may say, I'm going to focus on research funding because I'm associated with this medical school. So everybody will kind of identify a little bit where they're going to research or where they're going to highlight or focus on. And then that's a good way to kind of shape it. But be flexible, I'd say, because not everybody wants to work together in that capacity, and that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great question. I'm going to go through the chat to see, I'm trying to catch up on some of these, but if anybody would like to jump in, please do so.
How do I get a copy of all the things I've just seen? It sounds like people have the information about what team they're on. This is Beverly Crawford.
Hi, Beverly. So for everyone who signed up to be either virtual or in person, there were 2 separate sign-up forms, one virtually and one in person. You should have already received an email with the link on how to get on the app.
Oh,
and how
I
to.
don't know. I don't have that.
Okay, so then you might not have registered, which is okay. We might be able to slip you into a meeting or two. If you could just email your name, address, and phone number to Raquel Valencia, rvalencia@solvecfs.org, and Raquel can see if we can slip you into any meetings at this time. But yeah,
I'm in California.
I remember, Beverly.
Anna Eshu last year.
I remember. So again, you might want to check your spam filters if maybe those caught up the email that that was going out to you. But
R Valencia.
rvalencia@solvecfs.org.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem, Beverly. It's no problem at all.
I'm 84 years old and have had this for 35 years. And when I got sick, there were no computers. So I'm on an iPad. I don't see it doesn't put my name. I'm sorry to take the time.
No, Beverly, it's all okay. We're happy to have you. And again, email rvalencia@solvecfs.org and we'll get you all set up.
Thank you.
No problem, Beverly. It's great to hear your voice. Anyone else would like to jump in? Any other questions? Let's see, I saw the note about Senator King. Excellent. Oh, all right, Kim, I just saw your question about coordinating, allocating time among participants. Excellent, got to that one. Oh, excellent question. I see Romy, I hope I'm saying that right. There are 9 of you scheduled in your meeting to meet with one of your representatives. Is it realistic to think that everyone will have a chance? We do our best to keep meetings under 7. I will flag that there's a meeting with 9 people and we'll see if we can kajigger that on the schedule to get that a smaller group. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Oh, and Lauren, I see your hand went up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this really, really great training. So I'm from Wyoming, and so I'm meeting with representatives from Montana and Idaho, and I was wondering if you had any suggestions for like any differences in phrasing or anything when you aren't meeting with someone who's actually representing you in your state.
Great question. Thank you for that one. So as you notice, especially in the states where we have smaller populations, we tend to group people together so that you'll always have that group and you'll have that camaraderie so that you won't be on your own. So I mentioned it's important to identify the constituent at the beginning. So make sure the constituent has a chance to chat first. And then everyone else can definitely weigh in. I think the only thing that really changes when you tell your story is that you recognize that you're not talking about the experience for that specific district, but you have a shared experience. So for example, I'm in Los Angeles and I take a lot of meetings from Washington, where my brother lives, from Kentucky, where my cousin lives sometimes. And I say, you know, this is something my family has experienced. And even though my side of the family is in Los Angeles, this is what happened to my cousin in Kentucky. She lost this opportunity, lost that opportunity because she was helping out with my family. You know, my other friend in Wyoming, you know, this is what the experience happened there. So it's okay to try to make those cross connections, or if you really, again, don't want to make the connection, or just emphasize your experience and emphasize that the bill will help you. Great question,
Emily,
Lori.
we do that all the time in terms of sort of making a connection to an office, however much a bank shot it is. So all the better if you're Montana and you're meeting with Tester, or you're meeting with, you know, or you're meeting with Danes, you know, that's especially powerful. But don't hesitate, as Emily suggested, if you have a cousin, if you have a friend, if you spend some time in X, use it.
I just wrote this in the chat, but I also used to live in both Montana and Idaho. So if you need to have backup, I am willing to do that. I'm taking the whole day off on Thursday so I can do the virtual meetings. So
Fantastic. I'm writing that down right now. And that was Montana and
Montana
Wyoming?
and Idaho. If
Oh,
you're shy on Colorado, and I can't imagine you are, I also lived there. That's where my oldest two kids were born. And then my youngest was born in Montana. So
that is really helpful. Yeah, I definitely know Montana and Idaho is a little short. Colorado, I think we're good, but I'll go look at the list again. Thank you, thank you. Ileana, I saw your hand up first, and then Renee.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thank you so much for doing this. I just discovered it today, and it's a big relief to know this is happening. I may have missed it, but maybe this is more of a comment, but I've been so struck by the amount of women that are getting this, and I didn't see that mentioned in terms of the disparity. So I don't know, there's a long history of us being gaslit by the medical establishment. So if that could be mentioned somehow, I think that would add some much needed voices.
No, absolutely. We are very well aware, and it's been scientifically documented in a number of evidence-based studies that that women are more susceptible to long COVID and ME/CFS than men at a rate of about 4 to 1. So that is not lost on us. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we've requested in our appropriations requests, which I didn't talk about here, but this is a whole nother conversation for another day. In some of our other advocacy work, we requested an Office of Infection-Associated Chronic Illnesses in the Office of Women's Health Research. So we are very aware of the connection between women, especially in these illnesses. We didn't really highlight that in these conversations today because we really wanted to zero in on the bill itself. But if you want to discuss and you feel strongly that, hey, I really want to emphasize how this has a disproportionate impact on women, please feel free to do so. And then tie it back to the bill and say, that's why we need the Care for Long COVID Act to address all of these conditions that are disproportionately affecting women. Absolutely. Feel free to, whatever your truth is, bring it to this work. We'd love that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And Renee, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to say that although I'm in New York now, I lived 32 years in Michigan and raised my family there. And I know some of the, well, I'm a donor to many campaigns in Michigan. So if you need help there, but you probably have quite a few people.
No, that's really powerful. And Michigan is really important because that's where our only Republican supporter is from. So that's really key for us. I will definitely flag that for our team, and just keep an eye out on your schedule. If you see any updates, it's because we've taken that to heart and moved you around.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you for doing all this, Emily.
Oh, it's as you know, it's a labor
you
of
and your
love.
Team.
Yay, team.
Okay.
So I know we're
Right.
a few minutes over. Thank you so much for your time. If anyone has additional questions that we were unable to get to, please feel free to email them to R Valencia, that's the letter R, VALENCIA, at solve, like solve a puzzle, SOLVE, CFS for chronic fatigue syndrome.org. So once again, that's rvalencia@solvecfs.org. And if you have any questions we were unable to get to, please feel free to email them there and we will give you a response as soon as possible. Thank you again for all of your support, for all of your time, for all of your precious energy. We're so excited to have you here and looking forward to being part of Advocacy Week with you in just a few short days. Oh my goodness. We'll see you then. Thank you all again.